Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, we talk about 4 different types of freedom: time, financial, location, health freedom. And in that light, I'm always interviewing entrepreneurs, people on the leading edge of thought leadership, changing the world. So today we have John Ball, and he's actually a podcast presentation coach and show host. He's also a speaker. And so he's calling in from Spain. And so today's going to be talking about business coaching, and it's going to be a fantastic conversation. So without much ado, welcome to the show, John.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I know we had connected through Podmatch. So tell us a little bit about, yourself and how you got started.
How I got started as an entrepreneur was really just looking for some more meaning in my life. And I'd been introduced to the concept of coaching years ago and knew that it was something I really wanted to do. Wish I'd heard about it when I was at school. And I started studying. I certified as a coach and started working with people. Things just snowballed from there. So everything started once I got into coaching. I started working for some personal development companies. Some of them I still work for. And beyond that, I started getting into things like podcasting and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. But it all started with somebody planting the seeds and inspiring me to get into coaching.
Excellent. And so what's interesting is you dub yourself as a podcast presentation coach. And I'm always on the lookout for new terminologies, new ideas, concepts. Tell us what all that is and what it entails.
My goal really in what I do is to help people be able to go on podcasts as guests and even as hosts as well, and be able to be clear, concise, confident, and charismatic when they're delivering whoever the audience is that they're in front of, as they would want to be with public speaking, that have the same kind of effects in podcasting. Very often people are giving glib answers to things, or the same answers over and over again, and the energy isn't there, the excitement isn't there. It's just kind of feels like a chat that isn't that interesting to listen into. So I want to help people be able to turn that around to be someone that people want to listen to and be able to maximize the opportunities that come, especially through podcasting as a guest and as a host.
So tell us, what are some of the most common presentation mistakes podcast hosts and guests also do?
There's a lot, and there's nothing wrong with them because I've probably made most of them myself as well on my own journey. It's just, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. One of the biggest things is being a little bit self-indulgent, taking too long to get to the meat of things and really just sort of diving into it. And very often, the podcast shows will often start with the question of, tell us a bit about yourself. Now, for some people, that's going to be a fairly concise answer. They've already practiced it. They're going to give you a bit of an elevator pitch. But for some people, that's going to be their whole life story. And it's going to be a big, long, drawn out thing that you're going to be tuning out from. And this is what you have to remember. Your podcast audience is not invested in you yet, especially at the start of the show. So if they're already getting bored, you're going to start looking, well, maybe there's another episode I can listen to, or someone else's podcast. That is the last thing that you want. And it's the last thing you want as a host as well, is to be listening to somebody droning on and not paying attention. So that's a big one. So that's probably one of the things I hear in podcasts over and over again. I've done it myself, so I know that this is an easy mistake to make.
Yeah, it's so do you think basically charisma, being in front of the camera, being naturally, can someone learn that, or is it something that can be honed?
It can absolutely be learned, and it's something that it only really is going to come with practice and experience, and potentially, if you want to speed up that journey, with some coaching and guidance. But absolutely, it can be learned. You might come across as the least charismatic person right now, and that can all be changed just by choosing to make the effort. I've worked with in years with the Toastmasters organization, the public speaking group as well, and certainly seen people blossom and flower into some charisma there as they start to develop their confidence. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that really come into what charisma is. and they can be developed, but they can also be sped up as well along that journey. And not to turn everyone into like narcissists or anything like that, but to really just be more engaging, more energetic, more alive when you're in conversation with somebody else.
Yeah. One thing is what was interesting is you talk about narcissist and what's this narcissistic term gets thrown around a lot, but you talk about charisma for non. Are you saying that non-narcissists are not naturally charismatic?
The reason I say that is because charisma is a trait that is often associated with narcissism, and so the two things are not completely unrelated. If you only have to look at things like cult leaders, for example, to sort of see whether it's a religious cult, political cult, or any other kind of cult. The leaders tend to be very charismatic people. In fact, if they weren't, people wouldn't really follow them. And there's a huge amount of narcissism that goes with that, as well as a whole bunch of stuff that we're not going to get into here. But it's just one of those qualities that tends to be associated with that kind of thing. But it doesn't have to be. We all have the ability to have some charisma. And if you're going to be putting yourself out into the world, in video or audio or any format where you're being interviewed or presenting yourself, even as a public speaker, it's essential that you come across with some character, some charisma, some energy in what you do, and that's what a lot of people are lacking.
Yeah, it's quite it's basically like it's a tool, right? So tools can be used for good, can be bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, as I say, I studied neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis and those kinds of things. And again, those are things that, it's harder, I think, to use them for nefarious purposes, but people do. There are people out there teaching some stuff that I find a bit sleazy with relations to using NLP and hypnosis techniques to get bed as many people as they can in as short a time as possible, or that kind of thing. It's like, okay, maybe for them there's no ethical issue there. For me, I don't like that, and I think it's a misuse of those kinds of tools. But used properly, they can be very therapeutic and very powerful and empowering for people, done in the right way. And it's the same here. Like, if you're only, if your only tool's a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But having a wide variety of tools available to you allows you a lot more possibilities to build different things. But I always hope to teach what I teach for ethical usage, for people who want to put good stuff into the world. It's a prerequisite for me working with people that they have a mission, that they have a heart-centered mission that they want to help people.
Yeah. It's all, in the end, it's all about influence and persuasion. And one thing you talk about is basically podcasting advantage. We'll talk about blogging as well as podcasting, but tell us about podcast advantage for business coaches.
I think right now there is a huge opportunity in podcasting, more than there ever has been, because so many people have them now and are recognizing that there is an opportunity for people to get to know you. We are in a world where relationship marketing is becoming a much bigger deal than it ever has been before. So establishing relationships with your ideal audience is a critical thing to be able to do. And not everyone can afford to do that through masses of videos and Facebook ads. And so this is something like podcasting is a very cost-effective way, although not always the most time-effective way, but certainly a cost-effective way of being able to get yourself in front of audiences of people who are potentially your ideal clients, and be able to start that conversation and have thinking, all right, this person is interesting. They have something I'm interested in hearing about. Or the alternative of that, I'm not really interested in this, so I'm not going to look for another episode. We want that. Magnets repel and retract, and so we want to be on here as a way to do exactly that, attract the audiences and the perfect future clients that we'd like to work with, and repel those that we don't. And podcasting puts us in a position to be able to do that as a guest and as a host, if we choose to do that too.
And so, it's really interesting because I tell clients and everybody, if you missed out YouTube, YouTube's really hard to get followers now. But in the beginning, it was really easy. Instagram too. Now people are flocking to like podcasting, this untapped resource. And if you missed out on the previous, you can really create a brand and a following. Talk about blogging as a way of augmenting your podcast.
Blogging is something that I got into simply because I enjoy writing, not because I thought there was any great tactical benefit in it. I just really wanted to practice my writing. And then last year, I think it was last year anyway, the start of last year, LinkedIn opened up the capability to do newsletters on the website. And I thought, well, what the heck? I think I'm going to do a LinkedIn newsletter. So just over a year later, I'm still doing it. Haven't necessarily been as weekly as I would have liked to have been due to various things, but I certainly have enjoyed the process. My writing is improving. So for me, I still think there's power in blogging. I haven't accessed that yet. Perhaps I'm still mastering my craft there. But what I do find is it mixes very nicely with the podcasting. So I get to write about some of the stuff that I'm talking about, or explore some topics in a little more detail, and to add some more value to the people who may already be tuning into my show or following me online as well.
What's interesting is, like, I view, like, for example, like the podcast, that's your show, right? And then you can have, like, for example, like blogs, you can have Instagram, like a newsletter, whatever, and then that basically adds more value and it can funnel into your podcast, and it's snowball effect.
Yeah, for me, it's a way to be more present on a site like LinkedIn, which is, for me, is where a lot of my ideal perfect future clients already are. And so that's a good thing to have. Like, not that many people want to make that kind of effort of having a weekly newsletter that's going out. I see my numbers creeping up slowly, but they are creeping up. And that's encouraging for me that people are enjoying what I'm writing. And it maybe signifies that more people are sharing that and checking that out. But one thing I do believe as an entrepreneur, as a business person, although I don't often think of myself as an entrepreneur, I guess, but as a business person, I do think these days it's getting harder and harder to compete for ads, and people finally get a lot less reward for what they're spending out, because there's so much more competition and the prices just keep getting crazy. You're paying more and getting less. And so I do think strategies like podcasting and having a good email list are probably two of the most solid things you can do to be building your list kind of on your own terms. And certainly if you have your own show, it's on your own territory. If you have your own email list, it's your own land, your own virtual land, as it were, rather than on someone else's land where it could be shut down and you can't do anything about it. And having podcast interviews all over the place as well increases ubiquity, because I can say it takes about 7 points of contact for people to start to develop that level of trust with you. And so if they come into contact with you on several different podcasts, they're going to think, oh, this person's getting interviewed a lot. They're around. They're talking about some stuff that is interesting to hear about. I think this is where I think is the biggest opportunity for people right now. You don't have to be on that social media hustle. You don't have to be creating content all the time, paying a fortune on ads. You can have other people promoting you and your talking points and your content, introducing you to their audiences, and build up an email list while you do that. This is one of the most valuable things that you can have as a business owner, as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and like you were mentioning LinkedIn, really untapped resource. Everybody's talking about Instagram and TikTok. LinkedIn is the world where all the professionals and business owners, creators come. So it's really untapped. So these are very fascinating topics. One thing is, if you had to do it over again, would you start as being a guest or a host?
That's a great question. I'm happy you asked that. It's the advice that I give, and I have been getting some pushback from a few people recently, so I'm looking forward to having a few chats about this with some people who disagree with me. But I do now think it's far better to start out as a guest than a host. It's much less work. You can figure out your messaging. Like, one of the things that I have benefited from personally as being a guest is getting to get much clearer, much more concise about my message, about what I'm about, and about making sure that that's actually connecting with people in the right way. So I say certainly some of my earlier podcast appearances, that's very mixed up and it's not very clear. And so I had to do that. So I've made a lot of mistakes along this way. but I still think guesting is a great way to do that, a great way to discover whether you like podcasting or not, because podcasting, having your own show, it does require some work. It does require some significant commitment. I'm not saying podcast guesting doesn't if you're doing it right, but far less. It's far less of a commitment, and you're not necessarily so responsible for promoting those appearances then, and having to do all the work, or doing all the editing and promotion yourself, or hiring other people to do that, however you tend to choose to go about it. So yeah, I think it's a much easier path to take, and get in front of those audiences and start networking in the world of podcasting as well, and get advice from podcasters if you are looking to start your own show.
Yeah. And, people, you talked about advice. If there were anything that you could do differently now, what would you do differently, or what would you recommend?
Oh boy, I guess we all think about those times. If we could go back in time and change things, what would we do differently? My general answer is I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, yeah, there were things I would like to be different, but I actually wouldn't change a thing in my path. But if I was looking to go back and make some big improvement, it would really just be to go back and around 2012 when I first did a podcast, and tell myself to stick with it instead of giving up after 6 episodes. That would be the one big thing I would like to do.
Yeah, stick with it. I think the first year or so is just kind of a hobby, and now it's because it starts to build momentum. It's very interesting conversation. How do people follow you, check out your podcast, website, social media, etc.?
My podcast is called Podfluence, so it's very easy to find, like podcast and influence. Podfluence is a portmanteau. Search for that on LinkedIn as well. You'll find me there too. You'll find the Podfluence weekly newsletter. That's a good way to find me, because there are a lot of John Balls in the world. So it's hard to search for me. It's hard to search for me by name. But if you search for Podfluence or Podfluence Weekly on LinkedIn, that's a great place to connect with me. I hang out there a lot. I'm also on Twitter a lot, but LinkedIn is the very place. And if you want to listen to the podcast, it's on all the major podcast networks.
And for all the listeners out there, be sure to check out John's resources. They'll be in the links and show notes. Check him out on LinkedIn and Twitter. His podcast is titled Podfluence. It's got over 100 episodes. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast, and what a great, fantastic discussion.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.